It has been an entire year since Cats was released onto the world, and what a year it has been. And there's something that I keep in the back of my head whenever I see a movie this bad. A film this universally panned. It's this quote that I always heard attributed to the late, great Ennio Morricone when it came to music and the movies. And it goes something like this. A good film can survive a bad score, but a good score cannot save a bad film. In other words, if you write bad music, but it's in a good movie, no one will really care. But if you write an amazing score for a film that did pretty mediocre, people will still probably not care. Film scoring is a really thankless profession. But that kind of gets you thinking when it comes to a film like 2019's Cats, with what might be the worst film of the decade, keeping in mind that it's also a musical, it kind of begs the question, is there a possibility that we all missed something here? Was there a musical diamond in the rough somewhere in this cesspool of a film? Was the music in Cats any good? No. If we're going to talk about Cats, and we have to talk about how it works as a musical, which is not a difficult thing to do because Cats is not complicated. I don't just mean the film. The show Cats is as simple as it is vague, and that's what makes it work so well. I'm not kidding. Just give me a minute here and it's all going to make sense. So let's just go down the whole show. It'll make explaining everything way easier because this show is just so awkward. Okay, so we open with this cluster of numbers, the prologue, Jellicle songs for Jellicle Cats, the naming of cats, and the invitation of the Jellicle Ball. And we're introduced to our Jellicle Cats, a club of cats that are all trying to get selected to go to something called the Heaviside Layer, where they can go and be reborn and have a new life. So without a second to spare, we're immediately thrown into a bunch of cats singing and dancing about each other, I guess to try and justify why they should die. Yay. We get Jenny Anydots, the old Gumby cat, Rum Tum Tugger, the rebellious cat, Grisabella, the glamour cat, who, for some reason, used to be a Jellicle cat, but isn't anymore. She's no longer welcome to the party. Then we get Busterfer Jones, the cat about town, Mungo Jerry and Rumpelteazer, the mischievous cats, Old Deuteronomy, the leader of the Jellicle cats, who gets to select who gets to go to the Heaviside Layer and be reborn, a song about dogs fighting each other for some reason, and then there's this dance number called the Jellicle Ball, fine. Then we have this kind of weird moment at the end of Act 1 where we hear some more of Grisabella's number, then she tries to dance in the Jellicle Ball, but she's like old or washed up or both or whatever. She just can't cut it. Then she sings a little bit of Memory, and then it's the end of Act 1. Act 2 opens with Old Doot singing about, I guess, being happy. We'll get into this later, just trust me. But then we get right back into some more cats, like Gus the theater cat, Skimbleshanks the railway cat, McCavity the mystery cat, who also technically isn't a Jellicle cat. And McCavity kidnaps Old Deuteronomy, only for Old Deuteronomy to immediately be saved by Mr. Mistopheles, the magical cat. Then we get Memory, Grisabella gets selected to go to the Heaviside Layer, and Old Deuteronomy sings to the audience before they all get to go home. Alright, so here's how Cats works. Those opening few numbers collectively function as our establishing number. It's that one song that introduces the audience to the world and sets up our story. It's the Star Wars title crawl in musical form. If you want to know more about how musical numbers work, broadly speaking, you can check out my video on A Goofy Movie. So these opening few songs tell us about the world and the characters in it, exactly like what you'd expect from a musical. Total boilerplate opening to the show.
Do I actually see with my own very eyes a man who's not heard of a Jellicle cat? Jellicle cats meet once a year at the Jellicle Ball, where we all rejoice.
Do you know how to go to the Heaviside Layer?
Because Jellicles can and Jellicles do.
Announces the cat who can now be reborn and come back to a different Jellicle life.
They're Jellicle cats, they're going to the Jellicle Ball, but fine, and that's the world we're going to be in for the next 3 hours. Great, whatever. Now, in any other musical following your opening number, you'd then expect to get a number where our protagonist walks out on stage and wails to the crowd about how unhappy they are and what they want in life. Something called the I Want song.
The line with the sky is the sea, it calls me.
Now, you've heard this before, even if you don't think you have.
I want much more than this provincial life. I want adventure in the great white somewhere. I want so much more than they've got planned.
But we don't get that in Cats. Instead, what we get are 2 hours of cats singing about each other and themselves. These are not I Want songs like we get from our Disney princesses. Instead, these are what's called I Am songs. Songs that tell us about characters without really divulging into their wants and desires.
Busterfer Jones is not skin and bone. In fact, he's remarkably fat.
Gus is the cat at the theater door.
Skimbleshanks the
And that's because on top of not having a single protagonist that you would otherwise need the audience to emotionally latch onto, all of the cats in Cats want the same thing. They all want to be selected and go to the Heaviside Layer, which we learned in the opening number. It doesn't make sense to have an I Want song because there's no protagonist. In fact, if you wanted to take this one step further, you could argue that the Jellicle Cats are a character unto themselves, and that this is technically their I Want song, where we find out that they all want the same thing: death. So there are no individual I Want songs in Cats, except for one. Grizabella the Glamour Cat used to be a Jellicle Cat, wants to be a Jellicle Cat again, and she's now singing about wanting to be a Jellicle Cat again. She is desperate. She's the only cat that doesn't explicitly want to go to the Heaviside Layer. She does not have the same wants as the other Jellicle Cats. What she wants is to go back to what she had and become a Jellicle Cat again. And this number causes the whole show to do a 180. See, I Am songs are typically reserved for the villains of the show. Not always, but frequently. Think about The Dentist, or I'm a Mean Green Mother from Outer Space from Little Shop of Horrors, or even something like I'm Shiny from Moana. Those numbers are literally, this is what I am. I'm a dentist, I'm a Mean Green Mother from Outer Space, I'm Shiny. They do very little to explore the wants and motivations of the characters, and that's on purpose. By making your villain less three-dimensional, it makes it easier for the audience to side with the protagonist, especially in a show that's supposed to be widely accessible for families and children of all ages. Most of Cats functions like Gaston's number. The cats all sing about each other the same way that LeFou sings about Gaston, but even though it's LeFou doing the singing, it's still a song defining Gaston. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't flesh out your villain a little more by giving them an I Want song. Hellfire is actually a really great example of an I Want song for a villain. And you're typically going to want to give your villain an I Am song.
We don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us, and this monster is mysterious at least.
But what that means for Cats is that as soon as we get to the ending and Memory, one massive I Want song for just one character, all of a sudden it kind of hits you that we've been dealing with several hours. As you hear Memory, you'd have to be some kind of sociopathic narcissist to think, nah, give it to the fat cat, he has a monocle, I trust him. All of those I Am songs suddenly become irrelevant to the emotional turmoil that Grisabella's been holding on to. And it's why the cats all suddenly move to be more compassionate toward her. In the course of a single number, this whole show isn't about vanity anymore, it's about agony. And that's it. That's how Cats works. Cats is almost explicitly a case study in how effective an I Want song can really be, and that's it. The show's all fun and games until you get to the end and you realize Grisabella's really been suffering, then the show ends. The whole show hangs on Memory having that single massive impact on the audience. Structurally speaking, it's the first 15 minutes of a Disney movie interrupted by 2 hours of almost completely meaningless spectacle. Cats as a musical is just one big climactic moment called Memory, and that's it. And if you know anything about marketing and pop music, then you'll understand how this entire show became so famous by being carried by that one number. And this is where the sell for Cats is really important. Cats was the first ever mega musical, the stage equivalent of a Hollywood blockbuster, a musical that was internationally successful and known for its spectacle. Fun fact, it was actually the first ever musical to hook up each of their performers to an individual radio mic so they could project their voices across the hall while doing all that choreography. It's kind of poetic for it ended up, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. It's such a simple moral that anyone can grasp onto it. It isn't difficult to get. Don't judge a book by its cover. You never know what other people are going through. That's it. Everyone can understand that, and it works. And so, in short, you'd think that this would be a perfect setup for a really, really successful film. Then they decided to add Part 2, Victoria. Okay, so you decided to add a protagonist to the story that, by design, is successful for not having a protagonist. Anyone see a problem with this? Victoria's addition to the film, I think, is the worst thing I've ever seen in an adaptation. And if you stick your head in a microwave for a couple seconds, you can see how and why they thought that the changes that they'd made would work. So we need to go over a few things in a little more detail in order for all this to parse. Midway through Act 1, we're introduced to Grizabella, and we learn that she used to be a Jellicle Cat, but isn't anymore for some reason. Who cares why?
Would ever suppose that it was Grizabella the
Then, at the end of Act 1, Grizabella tries to join in the Jellicle Ball, and Jellilorum and Jemima sing some of Grisabella's song. And while this is really subtle, it's also super important. Jelly Lorm is the cat that helps Gus later on. She's sympathetic to the older cats and wants to help them. And Jemima, well, she's going to come back later on. But it demonstrates that even some of the most sympathetic and naive cats know to avoid Grizabella at this point. So after a little bit of Grizabella's number, Grizabella tries to dance but isn't really able to pull it off, and in her frustration, we get the first instance of memory.
Midnight, not a sound from the pavement.
If you pay attention, Old Deuteronomy's trying to reach out to Grizabella, but he can't quite reach out to her because she's like all the way at the front of the stage and he's like in the back, so he can't quite reach. And anyway, so Grizabella does this weird hand thing, which is important, remember this, and then she walks off. It's the end of Act 1 and everyone in the audience goes away to pee. In the opening of Act 2, Old Deuteronomy sings this song called The Moments of Happiness.
We had the experience, but missed the meaning.
Which is all about how, like, looking back at happiness offers a different perspective on the experience. You will remember your happy memories differently from how you experience them. Fine. Inspired and realizing what's going on, Jemima perks up and starts singing Memory.
Let your memory lead you on an appetite.
Jemima now realizes that Grizabella is what Old Deuteronomy is looking for as far as making the Jellicle choice. At this moment, Jemima now knows that Grizabella would be perfect for the Jellicle choice at the end of the night. On top of that, if you listen to the music during this number, it's the exact same music as Grizabella the Glamour Cat.
Beyond any meaning we can assign to happiness.
You see the border of her coat is torn and stained with sand.
It isn't so much foreshadowing or leitmotif as much as it is just lighting a giant neon sign over his head saying, Grizabella's the Jellicle choice, none of you have a chance. Then the entire second act is full of red herrings. Gus is old and has happy memories, but he still has a purpose with the Jellicle cats. He's the theater cat. And I guess that it's implied that he teaches some of the younger cats, and you're then led to believe that maybe Old Doot might pick Mr. Mistopheles because he brings him back after Macavity kidnaps him and he's a hero, but nope, it's not him either. Now, at the very end of the show, everyone's super happy that Old Deuteronomy is back, and Jemima gets on a car and sings a very short song called Daylight, set to the tune of Memory. This song is literally saying, it's almost daylight, it's almost time for Old Doot to make the choice. But then Grizabella shows up and ruins the party because she smells bad and the cats disperse. In a last-ditch effort, desperate to be a part of the club again, with absolutely no time left, Grizabella sings Memory to try and convince them to let her join.
Memory, turn your face to the moonlight.
But it isn't working and she collapses on stage. Oh, but what's that? Jemima comes in like Black Panther in Endgame and starts cheering Grizabella on and tells her there's no time left, it's now or never.
Like a flower.
So she modulates up another chromatic median and guns it. Now pay attention here, because this is where Cats tends to lose people. Like, believe it or not, there's a really weird Christmassy kind of vibe to Memory. Everyone always thinks that the lyric here is Memory all alone in the moonlight.
Memory all alone in the moonlight.
Stop. Okay, good.
That's not it. That's a different part of the number.
Memory, all alone in the moonlight.
The lyric here is actually, and that's more important than you'd think. Cats gets mocked for being really sexually suggestive, and it is. But the truth is that the physical contact is a big motif in the show. It shows how all the cats are interconnected. The cats touch each other to show that they're not alone. Specifically, they'll do that weird hand thing, just like you see Grizabella trying to initiate whenever she's on stage. When she screams, "Touch me," it's far more literal than you might think. She's desperate to go back to being a part of the group, and she literally wants someone to touch her so she'll be accepted by the group again. Then we hear the line, "If you touch me, you'll understand what happiness is."
If you touch
If you're the Jellicle cat that touches her and brings her back into the group, you'd be giving her the greatest gift in honor, having you for a daughter. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. But now here's where you really need to pay close attention to the show. Whenever Grisabella's on stage, the younger cats all rush to her to try and figure her out and welcome her to the group. But the older cats always stop them before they can touch her and tell them no. When Grisabella comes back on stage for Memory, one of those cats is Victoria. This moment where Victoria touches Grisabella isn't significant because it's Victoria, it's significant because no one stopped Victoria. It's a universal welcome from the entire clan. That's why Old Deuteronomy doesn't literally get up and touch her hand right here, because even though he thinks that Grisabella should be a part of the Jellicles again, it doesn't mean anything if the rest of the clan still rejects her. Victoria has no real significance here. In fact, the whole point is that Victoria is just some random cat. For all I care, it doesn't matter. What matters is that no one rushed to stop Victoria, and now Grisabella is a Jellicle cat again. And Tom Hooper basically took one long look at all of that and said, "That's nice." Just to give you an appreciation of how much of a colossal misunderstanding of the picture book level story we're dealing with here, look at this scene. Under no circumstance would Grisabella ever recoil from Victoria. Cats is successful because it's 90% spectacle and lycra. But if you pay attention, there's actually a story. It's just being told backwards from the perspective of the antagonists. This is what it would look like if you spent an entire Mario game inside Bowser's castle. Things would be really repetitive and weird right up until the last 15 minutes when all the action happened. And Hooper threw all the story away by adding Victoria. First off, he gets rid of Jemima, which, like, she's critical to getting Grisabella back into the club. Then they give Victoria this audience self-insert aspect to her so that Munkustrap has someone to talk to, but as a protagonist, she's like probably the worst thing anyone's ever done since giving Sonic teeth. On top of that, Victoria and her number, Beautiful Ghosts, almost entirely replaces everything that happens at the end of Act 1 and beginning of Act 2. In no small part, Victoria's character completely replaces any and all relationship Old Deuteronomy has with Grisabella, while also overshadowing and misinterpreting Jemima's role in the stage show. The whole point of adding Victoria was to make the show more accessible. If you're gonna do that, then it stands to reason that you're gonna bend this show to be more like a standard musical, or at the very least move it in the direction of one of those Disney movies. So we really should get a number for Victoria before anyone else. Her I Want song to tell us that she wants to be a Jellicle cat, because everybody wants to be a cat, because Cat's the only cat who knows. I'm gonna stop, I'm sorry. Anyway, so by not giving us a Victoria Disney Princess, the Wizard and I Want song moment until halfway through the show, there's like no attachment to her whatsoever. Who gives a crap about her? She basically doesn't have a personality. Then her I Want song, Beautiful Ghosts, is basically telling Grisabella, oh yeah, well your life has actually been really great. I was dropped off in a bag with no friends or family. At least you have beautiful ghosts.
But at least you have beautiful ghosts.
Which, like, excuse me, miss, this is a Wendy's. Belittling the emotional core of your show is, stupid, but it's a nuanced stupid, because they aren't just diminishing Grisabella's plight, they're also breaking Victoria's already senseless character. Does Victoria know what's up with the Jellicle cats? Or not? She's supposed to be the naive one that doesn't know anything so that we can have everything explained to the audience. But at the same time, she's sitting here lecturing Grisabella about her life like she knows, but she doesn't. Or does she? Does Munkustrap need to show her the ropes, or does she already have it down? Because she seems to know all the words when it matters. Does Victoria know what's going on or not? Because if she does, then her whole I Want song is basically saying, yeah, being a Jellicle cat does sound awesome, and you did totally screw it up, which is a really callous thing to do to the backbone of your show. Then when Old Deuteronomy gives us that limp-wristed delivery of the moments of happiness, and don't worry, we're gonna get to that, it almost feels like it's for Victoria, not Grisabella. Victoria is, at best, a severely confused character that makes almost no sense and comes at the cost of the core of the only story that you really get in Cats. So not only does Victoria's inclusion detract from the central point of Grisabella's emotional storyline, it actually invalidates it. It actively works against everything that makes this show work, which is why it's all so confusing. This whole show is just memory and 2.5 hours of justifying memory, and you've almost single-handedly annihilated basically everything about how it works. The lyric is literally touch me, and Grisabella here does not want to be touched. How simple do you need this to be? Oh, but if you pay attention to what happens right before before Jennifer Hudson screams, "Touch me," you'll find that Victoria is actually touching her. How did you get this so wrong? And then they give Jemima's line in memory to Victoria, which is really weird.
Sunlight through the trees in summer.
Like, if Victoria's entire song is explaining that Grisabella's life is better than hers because she got to be a Jellicle Cat, then why is she suddenly so concerned with bringing her back into the club? What does Victoria want besides having what Grisabella had, and why didn't she express that in her number? What is her motivation for wanting to help her so badly?
Daylight, see the dew on her sunflower.
And again, I want to reiterate, this song isn't some magical song that summons Grisabella or anything. It's literally just telling us that it's daylight. But this film gets that confused and thinks it's the only reason Grisabella comes to the Jellicle Ball. Like, without Victoria, Grisabella would have never shown up to the party and tried again. It completely removes all of Grisabella's agency. Victoria's the one trying to explain to Grisabella that she's got it good, while also being the one that's trying to bring her back into the Jellicle Cats. So cool, that doesn't make any sense. And then we finally get to the end of memory, and old Deuteronomy sings this line from Beautiful Ghosts. For a reason.
All your memories of pain, let them go.
So, hey, like, that doesn't have anything to do with, like, anything, unless you're literally about to kill Grisabella and she's gonna dance with ghosts because she's gonna be dead. She just wants to be a Jellicle Cat again. Grisabella's entire character arc is the absolute opposite of this Kylo Ren let the past die crap. She's so desperate to go back to her old life that she dies to be reborn into this club. So cool, that also doesn't make any sense. She's not letting go of the old memories. That's the point. You just don't understand, like, how Cats works, bro.